I'm David Liggett with Data Center Hawk, and I'm here with the CEO of DartPoints, Hugh Carspecken, and we're talking about the edge next. Well, Hugh, thanks for being here. Really excited to do this with you. This is a really fun topic to talk about. For those of you that don't know, DartPoints is a data center operator that's been around for a little over 5 years. And has really focused their efforts on the edge market. And I've talked to numerous people like in the industry in the last year, and I would say more than ever, edge data center solutions is a conversation that's continuing to come up. And so it's a really fascinating topic. But so first, will you just give the audience just an overview of y'all's company, and then also to define the best you can the edge data center market, because a lot of people have different thoughts on that. So before we start, I'd love to just get our arms around where you all kind of put the framework around that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been around since August 2012. We kind of started the micro edge data center operator market, building out what you would expect to be micro data centers, sub 400 kilowatts, located right where the customers are located. The definition of an edge, the best one I've heard was just recently from Gartner, actually, where they link edge is where the physical meets the digital, which I thought was actually very good. Yeah. Our definition has been where the request for the action is co-located with the compute, the analysis, and the actual action delivered.
Okay.
So traditionally that's been in the larger data centers. We're finding that being moved out further and further from the core. Where we've seen other regional providers, and now we're starting to see it go as far as the cell tower and even through the cell tower.
Sure, yeah. And I think that's been one of the interesting things. Hugh and I were talking before, and I was talking about how there's been a number of different solutions coming to the market over the last 12 months. And so, you all have been doing this now for 5+ years. So you've learned a lot. The company's probably pivoted as you've moved along, but talk about maybe strategically what some of your pivots have been as you've solicited customer feedback and gotten information from the customers you're trying to serve, and kind of your thesis on what the opportunity is. Yeah,
absolutely. So we started. My past has been focused on new industries that are filling in the gaps. So for example, in the wireless world, when they put data on the voice channel, they didn't plug in their antennas. So you had to actually start plugging in the antennas. We're seeing the same thing in the data center world. We started DartPoints actually to meet the needs of the mobile operators.
Okay, sure.
And back in 2012, they were all hot and heavy in the LTE 4G. And so they were very busy. They wanted to play around with it. They were looking at some cell tower homing, but it wasn't ready. And so we thought that we would shift towards the burgeoning enterprise colo market, to meet some of the demands that were there, but to keep it micro. Your gravitational pull in data centers is to get larger, so we wanted to stay small. And from there, we deployed sites. Some were awesome sites, some were very bad sites. And so we cut our teeth. We understood that the micro edge market is designed from the bottom up, not adaptation of larger designs.
Yeah, interesting.
And so and that's helped us. So as our market, our business model was focused on three things: the enterprise market, the interconnect market, and the mobile operator market.
Okay.
And obviously we spent the first couple of years working on the enterprise, but all that information has translated very quickly into the interconnect market that is just happening now. Interconnect at the edge, that is, and then the mobile operator, tower operator market.
Okay, so that's good. So the three different groups that you described, maybe of one of those, give us like a scenario where they had a requirement in the past that maybe has changed in nature and is now looking geographically at locating differently, maybe in size and in location, than it has in the past. So what's a good case study or good example of something like that?
Well, there's always a reverberation from a technology. And so cloud, as good as it is, has been around now for a little bit. And people are starting to wake up, and they're no longer anesthetized to the whiz bang of the technology and realizing, wait a second, there's some costs associated. And so we found many people actually realizing that in the colo market and in the cloud market, you not only pay for the colo or the cloud, but you also have to pay for the connectivity there. And so we identified that as if you move these together, you can reduce costs.
Yeah.
And so we found that total cost of ownership for opportunities that were 3 to 5 years long, we were able to save anywhere between 35 and 43% of their total data footprint, total cost of ownership.
Yeah.
Data footprint means not only your data center, but your head count, your travel times, your telecom. And so that was really interesting, which actually validates why you're seeing people moving past the tier 2 edge markets and even further, because you're realizing they're saving that latency, that optimization is translating to direct cost savings.
What do you feel like are, we talk demand drivers in the industry a lot, and so I think as a data center industry as a whole, we can put our arms around specifically some very key demand drivers that have grown the market in the last 3 to 5 years. As you think about edge, what are the technologies, or is the data that's really driving the push to get to those secondary markets, to get to even beyond that, as you mentioned?
Yeah. Well, we're seeing a hypersensitivity to location.
Yeah.
In the European Union, they're starting to deal with data jurisdiction, for example. This is a very difficult problem to deal with here in the United States, and so we found some people that needed data within certain counties. There's also, when you deal with the enterprise specifically, there's always a little stash that they like to keep right at their offices, that don't go outsourced. These can actually be fairly large. And so being able to help them with their CapEx and OpEx needs was just the basic low-hanging fruit. But the drivers that we're starting to see is the United States is recognizing that its infrastructure to date is behind the rest of the competing economies. And so now people are realizing they have to invest in the infrastructure. They need to push this out. You're seeing this, all the talk about 5G. It really has nothing to do with the wireless, It's everything surrounding 5G, As they push out their C-RAN, where they're creating their macro towers, where people are starting to realize where do they put their new caches. And so there are many different applications, content delivery just being one of them. But then as you get to things such as the autonomous driving vehicle, it's not the technology of the autonomous driving vehicle that's important. It's how many industries it touches.
Interesting.
It touches 30 to 40 industries, which is key. So for example, a Google driving car, that's great. What about Allstate? What about National? Where are they going? Where's DOT going? How do they support something like this? And it's not a today, it's in the future. And so there's a lot of pre-prepping for what is about to happen, and that's just one application.
No, that's good. And so when you hear of people talk about, like, one thing you'll hear in the industry a lot is edge data centers, and then you'll also hear micro data centers. And so talk to us about some of the differences there. Is that just people that don't know well enough, so like edge, micro, and not really knowing the differences, or would you all say, no, there's a very clear line between the two?
So a micro data center is an edge data center. An edge data center is not necessarily a micro data center. So there can be very large edge data centers. That's the physical location and the functionality of that data center outside of the tier 1 markets. That's basically the first definition of or first criteria of edge. Micro is exactly what it means. It's a smaller version of it. And the way you look at it is that micro is an evolution into an edge. So there are people that have larger requirements that start extremely small, but they can't bring in a larger player because to reach that higher megawatt, it's really hard to bring in a 4 megawatt data center when your demand is initially only 2 kilowatts, 200 kilowatts. And so, and then there's some that are going to be, the micro edge is a completely different microcosm of a larger data center, but you're dealing with a lot of different issues like physical security. And also it's the training of the environment. So people talk about a lot of density at the edge. No. It's not that it can't, but the density is not the issue. It's the compute that causes the density. Why would you put $1 million worth of compute at a location that has a 1 gig fiber line?
No, that makes sense. So you mentioned security. I think that as new solutions hit the market, everyone is always trying to put the framework around them.
That's right.
So, as you all have experience looking at potential office buildings and having a 200 kW deployment into more purpose-built type facilities. Talk to us about some of the security concerns and what you all have done, and maybe other edge data center providers are doing to maybe alleviate some of the perception that these might not be as secure as other facilities.
Yeah, well, absolutely. What's the modular industry is, everyone's been talking about it, but not many people have actually dug into the players that have been deploying for years. There's over 100 million watts of deployed modular data centers out there, and most have been consumed by exactly who you think would be consuming them.
Sure.
So there's a lot of understanding of these. It's not the issue of the modular data center that's the issue. It's the privacy, where you go from, every one of these have been purchased for a single use by a single tenant. You're now entering into a multi-tenancy. That's the transition. So these modulars are very, very strong. They're very, very robust. The internet companies of the world are walking through the mentality, and they're being conditioned for this. The compute, I mean, we hear of servers being run at 115 degrees. I mean, this happens. Not suggesting that that's how you do it, but they've been hardened. But what we are seeing is that getting to that multi-tenancy, you need to now realize which carriers don't like to touch other carriers. Which customers don't like to touch other. Those are the issues that we're starting to deal with as you get into a much smaller.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because it reminds me of on a different scale, but the wholesale colocation industry. You know, if you think probably 10 years ago, I don't think we could say that really existed, but what did exist was data center users in their owned and operated facilities, and their desire was to potentially get out of a scenario like that. Capital dried up in the market, and so they go into, you know, facilities like a Digital Realty or, you know, a CyrusOne or something like that could actually take the infrastructure, make it autonomous, and now they were actually multi-tenanting a larger building, but it was almost a perception of them having to get comfortable with the fact that I'm in the same area, but potentially I you know, have different infrastructure. And so it is interesting how perception plays into a lot of the changes of trends and the trend acceptance. And it'll be interesting to see how that impacts the edge world.
And what's interesting though is when you look at the tier 1 markets, everyone gets that.
Sure.
You look at the tier N markets, nobody gets that. Okay. So you are dealing with a completely different mindset in some of these locations. So if you're talking about a tower site, this is not everybody walks through, can touch it and get in there. Okay. You're dealing with a significant access list, okay, that is conditioned by other regulations. Okay. So in a lot of ways, these environments, they're all dark. Okay. They're fully automated. Okay. And you are limiting the touch point that someone has at that location.
What do you feel like will be the challenges that, you know, folks that are serving the data center industry at this level, providers that are offering these type of solutions? What are some of the challenges that you all will continue to face, or you feel like are coming? That, you know, we talked about the security one, but what are some other challenges that you feel like are coming for data center edge providers that are out there today?
Well, there's a distinction. The equipment's fantastic. And a lot of it can almost run itself. But there's a difference between the box and a benefit. And there are people that say, hey, I can get this and I can run this box. The problem is, as we well know in the data center world, there's other types of compliance regulations, the SLAs that roll into this. And so understanding the nature of this environment, how do you build operations to support these types of facilities? And you have to think less like a data center. And that's the biggest disconnect right now. You have the world of mobility and the world of data centers colliding.
That's good.
You need to have the footprint of a data center. But the mindset of a mobile operator.
Which is very unique.
And you need to bring that together. And that starts answering a lot of questions with regards to how do you get technicians out there? How do you gauge? For example, cell towers, you don't deploy generators. Okay. But you also can't deploy 5 minutes of battery backup time. Because if a site goes down, your customers are dealing with a regional outage, which is not just one site, it could be 15. So they now need to be able to go through their prioritizations and to figure out, okay, which sites are in higher demand? How do I shut these servers down? And a lot of people don't like to shut them down, but if your tower goes down, there's no reason to be operating your server.
So if you think about like geographies that you would say are and maybe the list is long, but help people understand just from a location standpoint, as an example, where are some areas that you would call the edge? I mean, the physical cities that you would say, hey, it's not necessarily this city, but it'd be as far out as X city or whatever it might be.
Well, absolutely. Not to be cavalier, but obviously we've got edge deployments here in Dallas, for example.
Sure. Yeah.
And edge is, again, it's where the physical is meeting the digital. Yeah. Again, I love that definition by Gartner. But you are going to see a need to push interconnection further and further.
Okay.
You're having a lot of different industries. Your gamers aren't necessarily being in tier 1 markets. They can be out in the middle of Iowa, for example. Yeah. We're seeing a huge driver on education, that you're seeing a huge urban-rural divide.
Yeah.
And a big push on that. So the tier 3, tier 4, tier 1 markets have traditionally not been attracted to data centers, but they, and I'm not saying that the population supports mega data centers, but there's a new data set being created out there that needs a place. And also, as you get into, and I'll bring the autonomous vehicle back into this again, not every cell tower is equal.
Okay.
As soon as you start putting life safety on top of an autonomous driving vehicle, there's going to be a uniformity of all of this.
Yeah.
That you will have a 5G cell tower that will have all the latest and greatest in the middle of a cornfield, as you will in Dallas.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that the internet companies will be at the base of that tower, but you're going to be, it's not about delivering streaming video to your family of 4 in the car. It's how do I make sure that this car hasn't flipped over and can communicate back.
And that's really interesting as the technology shifts from leisure to everyday life. I would say almost like safety that we take for granted probably. That is going to change the way that these areas are viewed, how safe and secure they need to be. And so it's interesting the opportunities that as technology advances, are creating for the industry to innovate and create solutions that solve things or solve problems that companies and consumers have. When you think about what are some of the things that excite you most about doing what you all are doing? I mean, you all have been. I remember when we met for the first time 5 or 6 years ago, and y'all were just kind of birthing this idea and getting it out to the market. You've been in this now for however long, 5, 6, 7 years. What are what excites you the most about what's taking place today?
Mm-hmm. Well, the first thing is it's nice to be not hitting the forehead with a hammer by the industry. Okay, that's slowing down. But it's well, first of all, this is a very natural step in data centers, and as good as it can be for the edge and the micro edge, it's going to be many, many times better for a lot of the core as well. The core is going to grow with this.
Yeah, sure.
And the reason for that is a new type of data set is being created.
Okay, sure.
Okay, and I call it kind of a logistical data set that needs to be analyzed, and then analytics is not happening at the edge. It's being pulled in back to the core. And that's where these traditional data centers are starting to recognize, wait a second, the edge and the micro edge, they're aggregators for me. So they're starting to get behind us in a lot of ways, and which is really exciting. We're also seeing brand new types of real estate showing up, the tower operators. Okay, this past summer, all of a sudden you can literally go to the internet companies and say, hey, I've got 40,000 locations I can put this in. Where would you like me to go?
Sure.
And actually get a response back from the internet companies. Okay, so that's quite interesting because this is beyond. They can absolutely technically do this themselves. The question is, do they financially want to do it?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. And Wall Street has not necessarily rewarded those that have had to always spend every dollar on the new infrastructure. They like the people who can come in and arbitrage and get out. And so this new scene, again, we're starting to calculate nearly $1 trillion of infrastructure construction over the next 10 years. Mm-hmm. Now, that's a high end, okay? And everyone says, well, I'm not reading about this in Wall Street Journal. Well, it's because it's across 40 industries.
Sure.
Okay. Are you reading about GM's deployment? Are you talking about the hospital systems deployment? I mean, all these things that are happening, and so the customers that we get run the gamut, and so that's quite interesting. Sure. And seeing the brand new applications that are being enabled just because you place critical infrastructure right where you need to.
When you are considering smaller deployments, so 200, 300, 400 kW, are you capped at a certain point with your growth, depending on the location, or talk about, Talk about that, because one of the things we've seen, actually we were talking about it in one of our video vlogs, is your ability to, or data center operators' ability to, almost like markets are merging together. So you have smaller providers trying to do bigger deals, bigger providers trying to do smaller deals. So how do you, how do you keep focused on what makes you and what makes the solution different in the market? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So the only area where we have a little bit of overlap is on the enterprise side.
Okay, sure.
The interconnects could get a little bit larger, but again, it's the way that we typically view this is we use a lot of military analogies. So, I mean, where you've got the Army over here, but you've got special forces over here. So there really is a discipline criteria that we have. So if we were to grow a site and you improperly designed it, these are all purpose built. So if I start adding on and bolting on, I will have built the most expensive large data center in the world.
Sure.
Okay. At a certain point, my economies of scale are going to completely fall apart if a site goes beyond. Okay. So you have to understand how to build this small, and if you need to add, how do you add on success-based and also economically? The good news about tower site, they are fairly space constrained. Okay, and so you go in there with a very regimented design that keeps it tight, where you will have a little bit of spatial change, but you try to get into the horizontal and the vertical really quickly. And then the interconnects are kind of in between, where some of them will grow. Okay. And at that point, it's going to be more of a market base, where you're located in a lower tier market, and you just own the market. And so we do try to keep it low. One thing we do try to do is if we get a deal that's too big for us, we try to send it up. We try to give it to the larger guys that can actually handle it. And it is kind of interesting to see their expressions when you do hand them that deal.
I bet. Yeah, those don't get handed up very often. So talk about 2018, you know, and kind of the new year, and what you think will be trends from a data center industry perspective. I mean, obviously, we've seen deal sizes get smaller, so just naturally it supports, you know, what you all are focused on just from a solve perspective. But what are some other trends that you're seeing or you expect to see in 2018?
Yeah, we're seeing the dichotomy between enterprise and colo and a little bit doing themselves. Okay, so a lot of them have moved into the cloud or into a co-location facility. And what we're seeing them steady out on is they're getting comfortable with what their internal bit is. So on the enterprise side, it's not a 1 or a 0 equation. They've got a percentage of a little bit on site, a little bit in the cloud, a little bit in colo, and we're starting to see that settle out. So we're going to start seeing a lot of our enterprise business grow. Now the sizes of those are coming up a little bit. So we're starting to, you know, where it's around 100, 150, it's now 200, 250. Okay. And we are having a lot of conversations where, hey, I want to start at 200. My 5-year plan could be a megawatt. And that presents some challenges, but we work through that. But you are in 2018, you're seeing a lot of the chips being played in preparation for 2019, 2020 for the interconnects and the tower sites. You're not going to see a lot of revenue at the towers yet. But you are going to see a lot of trialing, a lot of figuring out what exactly is required, a lot of tower site roadshows where people can figure out, hey, what is this? And in preparation for 2019, which is essentially the 5G kickoff, where they're really going to be rolling a lot of that out.
Awesome. Well, thank you for doing this, Hugh, very much. If you want to find out more, you can go to our website, datacenterhawk.com. If you want to find out more on our blog, you can go to datacenterhawk.com/blog. Thanks for watching.